All right, so here in the routes folder, let's add a new file. We can call this logins.js or auth.js. Either works, but auth is more common. So auth.js, again, to save time, I'm going to borrow some code. So let's go to users.js. I'm going to copy all the code that we wrote in this section and then paste it in auth.js. Now, before we get into the details, let's go to index.js. On the top, import this new module. So const auth, we set this to require routes/auth. So if we have any requests to this endpoint, /API/auth, or one of its child endpoints, we're going to delegate this to this auth router. So the big picture is done. Now let's look at the details. So back in the auth module, on the top, first we need to validate the body of the request. But this validate function we have here, this is the one that we imported from our user module. So this is validating that in the body of the request, we have 3 properties: name, email, and password. Now in the real world application, you might have other properties as part of registering a user. So this validate function is for validating a new user. It's not for validating the email and password that we expect in this endpoint. So here we need a different validate function. So I'm going to remove this validate function from here and define a separate validate function in this module. Now to save time, I'm going to go to our user module and copy that validate function. So we have validate user. Let's copy this back to the auth module, paste it here, and then change this to validate. Now we can change the parameter to request. Now for this schema object, we need only 2 properties, email and password. So let's delete the name and we're done. So back to our route handler. This is our first validation. Next, we need to make sure that we do have a user with the given email. So we load the user. If we don't have the user, so here we apply the not operator. If we don't have the user, we should send a 400 error to the client, which means bad request. And the message should be invalid email or password. Note that here I'm not sending a 404, which means not found, because we don't want to tell the client why the authentication failed. We don't want to tell if the email is incorrect or the password. So we don't want to say we don't have a user with the given email. We just tell the client that this is a bad request. It doesn't have the right data to be processed. So this is for validating the username or email in this case. Next, we need to validate the password. For that, we need to use bcrypt. So let's delete all this code here. This bcrypt object that we have has a compare method. We use this to compare a plain text password with a hash password. So our plain text password is in request.body.password. And our hashed password is in user.password. Now, as you saw earlier, this hashed password does include the salt. So when we call the compare method, bcrypt is going to get that salt and use that to rehash this plain text password. If they are equal, then this will return true. Okay, so here we need to await this promise and store the result here, invalid password. Now, if the password is not valid, again, we're going to return a 400 error with that vague message, invalid email or password. So I'm going to just copy this and paste it here. And finally, if we get to this point, that means this is a valid login. So for now, I just want to send a simple true value to the client.